There is a silent power that flows within you, not born of the outside world, not shaped by circumstances, but arising from the very center of your spirit. When you learn to still the noise, to cleanse away conflict, and to think with clarity, you step into the primal order where Christ has always been present. This is not a journey of adding more, but a journey of returning. Each part of these 16 chapters will unfold for you a perspective, a principle, an experience, so that you not only know, but live fully in that power. Let this story guide you from stillness into order, from order into rest, and from rest into a new life. Silence and presence. Silence is not the absence of sound, but the solid ground upon which a steadfast presence is revealed. When the mind no longer chases after what it imagines to be important, no longer strives to prove its worth, no longer clings to defense and resistance, a new space opens. In that space, there is a hidden rhythm, like a gentle light behind the eyes, like a subterranean stream flowing through the veins of the earth, quiet yet indestructible. This is the presence of Christ, the living wisdom of the divine mind, which has been there from the beginning, waiting only for the soul to be still long enough to recognize it. Silence is not easily touched, for most of life is wrapped in noise and commotion. Noise is not only the sounds of the outer world, but the restless murmur within, the endless worries, the unanswered questions, the imagined scenarios that never happened yet still haunt. This is the habitual operation of the ego, forever seeking to fill the gap with thoughts, with stories, with control. Yet the power of the divine mind never reveals itself in confusion. It requires a pause, a softening of the clamor, for truth to be heard. When you stop and let silence take its place, you discover something essential. You are not the ceaseless stream of thoughts running in your head. You are not the storm of anxieties or the sudden bursts of anger. You are not the images of triumph or failure that you so tightly grasp. You are the presence behind it all, the foundation beneath every experience, the primal awareness through which Christ has always sought to shine. That is why Emmet Fox declared that Christ is not merely a figure in history, but the living wisdom within every soul, a spiritual reality that cannot be wounded and cannot be destroyed. It is in silence that Christ ceases to be an idea and becomes a living truth. It does not come with spectacle, nor appear through mystical visions, nor demand elaborate rituals. It comes as a stream of clarity. It shifts the way you see everything, offering a depth you had overlooked before. Christ is not waiting outside for your worship. He is already within you, needing only your openness to be revealed. This presence does not require improvement, nor addition, nor correction. It only requires discovery, and that discovery transforms the way you live. Instead of rushing into endless pursuits, you begin to live from the center. Instead of being pulled by unseen fears, you stand upon the ground of peace. From that ground, you recognize that your true nature has never been harmed, never been afraid, never been uncertain. Many fear silence because they are accustomed to noise. Silence feels empty, lonely, even frightening. Yet the truth is that silence is not emptiness, but fullness. It is like a room long closed that when opened, dust rises and light floods in. The dust is the clutter of thoughts. The light is the sacred presence that has always been there. If you simply allow silence to do its work, Christ inevitably reveals himself. Christ does not appear to make you extraordinary in the eyes of the world, but to make you authentic in the depth of your own being. When you live from this presence, every action carries a new quality. Your words grow softer, yet heavier with meaning. Your choices are less driven by fear and more guided by clarity. Even the way you walk, the way you look at another reflects something no longer bound to the ego. Others may not name it, but they will feel it. The hardest part is not to reach this presence, but to believe it has always been yours. The ego insists that you must earn, must achieve, must seek, but Christ does not come that way. He is not a reward, but the foundation, not something that will arrive, but something that has always been. He does not wait for striving, but for surrender, surrender of noise, surrender of control, surrender of the belief that you must become someone else. When you dare to sit in silence, even as the mind first resists, you will sense a deeper current that is not disturbed by surface waves. That is the Christ mind. It does not follow the fleeting, but abides in truth. It does not falter before turmoil, but holds you in peace. It does not come from without, but from within. And when you allow it to speak, your life begins to change. Silence is the key that opens the doorway to your very core. There, Christ is not a tale of old, but a living truth, a sacred intelligence flowing through every clear thought. Once touched, you will not wish to trade it for any other noise, for in silence, you recognize it. You are never lacking, never alone, never separated from the endless source of life. Christ is a principle, not a person. Christ is not a distant figure in history for you to look up to and worship, but a living principle within your own mind. This principle has no age, no confinement by time or place. It is the unchanging foundation of spirit, the wellspring from which all creation arises. People often attach Christ to an image, an event, a story handed down through books. Yet if you stop there, you miss the essence that Emmet Fox so clearly pointed out, that Christ did not come to be exalted outwardly, but to be discovered inwardly. Christ is a spiritual order, a perfect clarity of consciousness, ever seeking to express itself through the channel of human thought. It is like the light of the sun, shining without ceasing. But to pass through the window, the glass must be clean. If the window is covered with dust, the light remains, but you do not see it fully. So it is with Christ, always present. But if the mind is burdened with conflict, anxiety, and division, that light cannot fully shine through. For Christ to operate, the mind must be cleansed. As a river must be freed from mud for its waters to run clear. Have you ever wondered why so many times you prayed, read sacred words, repeated affirmations, yet still found your heart restless, still trapped in circles of fear and doubt? It is not because you lack faith, but because Christ has not been allowed to flow through the channel of your daily thought. When thoughts remain divided, half believing, half fearing, half hoping, half doubting, the spiritual principle cannot operate in fullness. The divine law does not wait for you to become moral enough or worthy enough. It is always at work, but it can move only through a mind that has been purified of contradiction. Remember that Christ is a principle, not a person. If he were a person, he would be confined to a moment and an image. But as a principle, he has no boundary. He is life. He is light. He is the perfect pattern already planted in every soul. See Christ as a person, and you remain outside, waiting for a miracle. See Christ as a principle, and you step inside and cooperate with life itself. And in that very moment, the miracle takes place in your thoughts, in your choices, in your actions. The question is never whether Christ exists, but whether you will allow him to operate through you. A mind that clings to contradiction is like soil that receives both good seed and weeds. The seed of Christ is there, but so too the weeds of fear, doubt, regret, resentment. The result is a tangled field, part fruitful, part barren. For the seed of Christ to grow strong, you must clear the contradictions, pull out the weeds, and leave the soil pure for the principle to bloom. Let me ask you something right now as you listen. Do you still believe Christ is something outside, far away? Or have you begun to see him as the living principle within you? This question does not demand a spoken answer, but an honest one, for the way you answer in your heart will determine from where you live, whether from the lack of the outer world or the fullness of the inner. Christ does not need to be begged to appear, for he has never been absent. All he needs is a mind that is clean, decisive, undivided, and when you allow this principle to move through you, you will find peace arriving without reason, clarity shining, even in confusion. Then you are no longer ruled by circumstance, no longer swayed by upheaval, no longer trapped by old stories. You live from the center, and that center is Christ. Thank you for journeying and listening to this point. Your very presence, your attention, has opened a space for these words to become seed, and that seed requires only one condition to sprout, that you allow yourself to release contradiction and to receive Christ, not as a distant figure of the past, but as the living principle, ever waiting to reveal himself through you. The decision to awakening does not arrive as a thunderous event descending from the heavens, nor as the dramatic explosion so many anticipate. It is simpler, yet far more decisive. Awakening is the moment you resolve no longer to let fear, limitation, and the past govern your thought. It is the moment you choose to think differently, to think as Christ thinks. Everything begins with a decision not from circumstance, not from emotion, but from a turning inward. Many wait for an outward miracle to awaken. They long for a shattering event, a mystical encounter, a visible sign from above. Yet the more they wait, the further they drift. For awakening is not a gift bestowed from without, but a radical shift in the very operation of thought. It does not come from visions of dazzling light or voices from the unseen, but from ceasing to think with the old mind, ceasing to let the habits of fear and doubt dictate, and beginning to think with clarity, with simplicity, with the stillness through which Christ expresses. This decision is not easy, for the ego is well accustomed to surviving on fear. It convinces you that worry is reasonable, that suspicion is wisdom, that clinging to pain is proof of awareness. But the truth is that these are the very chains that keep you bound. When you decide to awaken, you refuse to let the ego write the script of your thoughts any longer. You face it and declare, enough. No longer thinking as one conditioned by fear, no longer feeding the limits of yesterday, no longer letting the past define the present. Awakening is not fighting against fear, but simply refusing to give it power. When you decide to awaken, you need not destroy the past. You need only stop using it as the ground of thought. You need not shatter limitation. You need only cease allowing it to chart your path. Nor must you strain to overcome anxiety. You need only recognize it as something that is not your true foundation. The true foundation is the Christ mind, and the Christ mind never operates from fear. It operates from certainty, from simplicity, from clarity, as an unshakable center. A single decision can redirect the entire course of a life. When you choose to think as Christ thinks, you cease to use thought as fuel for worry. and instead use it as a mirror of truth, Christ thinks in order, not in confusion. Christ thinks in clarity, not in vagueness. Christ thinks from the present, not from the past. The decision to awaken is the decision to let that truth become the language of your mind. And once you choose, the spiritual law immediately goes to work, for the law requires but one condition: agreement. People imagine awakening as a single milestone, yet in truth it is a decision repeated day by day, hour by hour. Each time fear attempts to take hold, you may return to the choice. I will think as Christ thinks. Each time the past seeks to define you, you may return to the choice. I no longer identify with what has been. Each time limitation speaks, you may return to the choice. The Christ mind knows no limitation. This is not denial of reality, but the choosing of a higher order of reality, the order in which Christ is principle, not fear. The decision to awaken is like placing a great stone in the river's flow. The waters still rush, the waves still rise, yet the stone remains unmoved. Your mind once may have been swept along by the currents of habit and anxiety, but with this decision you become the stone. You do not stop life from flowing, but you stand firm within it, no longer carried away by every wave. And from that steadiness, you come to see that awakening is not an act once done, but a way of living. The wonder is this: the moment you choose to think as Christ, the world begins to alter the way it responds to you. Not because the world itself has changed, but because you have changed the way you see, and that vision is the seed of all experience. You no longer react from fear, and so circumstances lose the power to overwhelm you. You no longer decide from the past, and so old cycles break apart. You no longer look at life through the lens of limitation, and so new possibilities open. All of it begins with a single choice: to cease thinking as before and to begin thinking as Christ. Awakening is not the privilege of the few, but the capacity of all, yet only those who dare decide will enter it. It is not a half-hearted choice, but a decisive one, a choice with no return. And once you have chosen, the Christ mind begins to weave the structure of your thought anew. It rearranges, reshapes, until fear can find no resting place. The past no longer holds authority, and limitation no longer has reason to exist. This is the essence of awakening, not noisy, not showy, but sharp and final. It does not alter you by outward mask, but transforms you from the root, and from that root, a new life begins. Right thinking is spiritual accuracy. Right thinking is not forced optimism, nor is it a set of temporary psychological tricks to soothe emotions. It is the precision of spirit, the clear gaze into truth, so exact that error can find no hiding place. When your mind begins to operate in that clarity, every mist of illusion dissolves, just as sunlight drives away the darkness without debate, without resistance, without struggle. Truth requires no argument. The simple presence of light makes falsehood retreat. Right thinking is not a game of feelings, nor the shallow self-hypnosis of empty positive phrases. It demands absolute honesty with yourself, honesty to recognize which thoughts are born of truth and which are echoes of fear, honesty to see when you are dressing disorder in beautiful words, honesty to stop attaching religious or philosophical labels to mistaken beliefs and confusing them with reality. Emmet Fox declared that if a person begins to think rightly, not through ritual, not through emotional habit, but truly in the light of spirit, they will experience the presence of God at once. No waiting, no elaborate procedure, for truth is always here, waiting only for a mind accurate enough to reflect it, error is not expelled by effort, but dissolved by clarity. Right thinking requires the removal of every layer of covering, every layer of fear, every shadow of doubt. Every veil of falsehood that you once allowed to remain in your mind must be cleared, not bidenial, but by direct seeing. When a thought arises, ask, does it spring from truth or from fear? Does it bring clarity or confusion? Does it liberate me or imprison me? If it cannot stand in the light of those questions, it does not belong to you. And when you refuse to feed it, it vanishes of itself, right? Thinking is not about painting everything with positivity. At times, spiritual accuracy will confront you with truths you once avoided, truths that sting at first, but heal at last. For truth frees, while lies confine. Truth heals, while illusion wounds. To face truth with courage, even when it unsettles you, is the beginning of freedom. Your outer life is always the mirror of your inner thought. If chaos appears without, unresolved contradictions remain within. If anxiety surrounds you, mistaken thoughts are still being sheltered in your heart by right thinking. You cease blaming circumstance and turn instead to cleanse the mind. And when the mind is clear, life itself cannot help but change. The power of right thinking lies in its precision. It does not allow compromise. A true thought is a true seed, and it must bear true fruit. A false thought, even if clothed in eloquent words, will produce false results. This is law, and law does not bend. The Christ mind makes no bargains with error. It knows only truth. Now let me ask you, the one listening, in the past week, how many times have you allowed a false thought to linger in your mind, thinking it harmless? Do you see how a single small thought, repeated often enough, can harden into belief, and belief into lived reality? Be honest with yourself, for that honesty is the first step into right thinking. If you feel this truth and are ready to choose clarity over contradiction, I invite you to leave a sign. Write in the comments a simple phrase, I am ready to change, or even type the number 1. This will not be for me, but for you as a witness to your own decision. From this moment on, you choose right thinking. I thank you for being here, for listening with full attention. Your presence is the soil in which this new seed of thought may grow. Remember, right? Thinking is not a theory to recite. It is a way to live each day. It shows itself in the first thought you choose upon waking, in the way you respond to challenge, in how you regard yourself. Each right thought is a step on a new path, and that path does not lead to a distant goal, but brings you home to your original essence, where you and Christ have never been separate. The law of mind and spiritual causation. Everything you see in the outer world originates from what has first taken shape in the inner world. Life is not a chain of random events, but the precise reflection of thought. The visible always bows to the invisible. Form is only the result of the structure established in mind. This is an unchanging law, a principle that operates ceaselessly, whether or not one believes it, whether or not one is aware of it. A thought is not a fleeting shadow, nor an innocent activity that occurs only in the head. A thought is a seed, and like every seed, it carries within itself the potential to shape the future. A thought held long enough, repeated often enough, and infused with sufficient emotion becomes a belief. That belief becomes the lens through which you view life. And through that lens, you act, you choose, you react. Gradually, your entire life is built according to that pattern. The law of mind operates with absolute fidelity. It does not judge. It does not discriminate. It does not favor one thought over another. It simply receives what you plant and returns to you a harvest in kind. If you sow thoughts of lack, the law will faithfully reflect conditions of lack. If you sow thoughts of peace, the law will faithfully provide conditions that give rise to peace. The law does not choose for you. It only works with what you have chosen. For this reason, the strength or weakness of your life does not lie in circumstances, but in the way you think. Some believe that life is ruled by chance, but in truth, there is no luck in the realm of spirit. What we call accident is only the harvest of seeds sown unconsciously. People are often puzzled when they encounter the same situations, repeating cycles in work, in relationships, in disappointment. But look deeper, and you will see that each cycle is the reflection of unchanged beliefs in the mind. Change the belief, and the cycle ends. The law of mind functions like an invisible architect. It takes the material of thought and builds it into form. If thought is divided, the structure outside will be unstable. If thought is clear and steady, the structure will be enduring. Many attempt to repair the house on the outside without touching the design within, and so their efforts are only patchwork. But when you alter the design, the house itself must change. Thus, whenever you look at your present life, instead of complaining or resenting, the true question is, what have I been thinking that produced this? This is not self-blame, but self-empowerment. For if thought was strong enough to create an unwanted condition, then it is strong enough to create a new one. If the law faithfully reflected disorder, when I thought wrongly, that same law will faithfully reflect order when I think rightly. Seen in this light, you cease to regard yourself as a victim. You are no longer trapped in the role of passively waiting for circumstances to shift. You understand that when thought changes, circumstances must change. This is not empty optimism, but foundational principle. The inner directs the outer, the invisible shapes. The visible thought is the cause, and life is the effect. The law of mind also shows that no condition is permanent. Every limitation is only the temporary form of a certain thought. When thought changes, limitation dissolves, making room for new form. That is why no situation is hopeless. There are only thoughts yet to be corrected. When you grasp this, you stop seeing difficulties as sentences of doom, and instead recognize them as signals pointing to the places in thought that need clarity. What makes this law both exacting and merciful is its perfect accuracy. It shows no favoritism, grants no privilege. It simply reflects what is within. That is why two people can live two entirely different experiences in the same circumstance. One, holding thoughts of fear, lives in turmoil. The other, holding thoughts of peace, lives in clarity. It is not circumstance that decides, but thought. If you wish to know what you truly believe, simply look at your life as it is now. The repeated results are not created by others, but by the very thoughts you have allowed to take root. Life is a mirror, and the mirror never lies. It does not mock. It does not condemn. It simply reflects, and its reflection is not meant to make you despair, but to awaken you, to show you it is time to change the inner design. The law of mind and the causation of spirit is the path from passivity to mastery, from obscurity to clarity, from victimhood to co-creation. Once you begin to live in this awareness, you cease chasing to fix the world and instead turn to adjust the mind. And once the inner is straight, the outer has no choice but to align. This is one of the simplest yet most powerful truths. Thought is cause, life is effect, and once you live truly in this truth, you will know that nothing lies beyond your reach. For all things begin, move, and are completed in the world of thought before they ever manifest in the world of form. The blueprint of repetition and emotion, the spiritual law operates like a neutral mechanism, showing no favoritism and making no exceptions. It does not care who you are, where you came from, or how much experience lies behind you. It simply reflects and amplifies what you continually plant in your mind. A fleeting thought may not amount to much, but a thought repeated, etched with clarity, and sustained with emotion becomes the blueprint of reality. Life does not respond to vague wishes, but only bows to mental images shaped with clear structure. Imagine the mind as a field. A seed tossed carelessly, left untended, will soon wither, but a seed nurtured consistently, placed in good soil, watered faithfully, will sprout and grow into a tree. So it is with thought. Each idea you repeat with clarity and emotion sinks deeper, takes root, and grows into circumstance. Life does not grant what you want in a passing moment, but what you steadily believe and vividly imagine. Many say they want peace, yet spend most of their time repeating anxious images in the mind. They wish for prosperity, yet daily impress upon themselves the fear of lack. They long for love, yet hold on to memories of pain as scars unhealed. The neutral law can only build from the blueprint provided, and that blueprint is not written by fleeting wishes, but by thoughts repeated with feeling. Reality is nothing more than the inevitable outcome of that inner consistency. This is why Emmet Fox emphasized the training of thought. You cannot depend on momentary emotion. One prayer whispered in fear cannot outweigh the hundreds of times you have pictured lack. One affirmation spoken in fragile hope cannot erase the thousands of times you have repeated doubt within. The law does not respond to passing intent. It responds to the pattern impressed with consistency. The blueprint of reality is drawn by repetition. What you think each day, what you feel, what you imagine, all leave their mark. Emotion is the glue that makes the imprint endure. A thought without emotion is a faint trace of ink, easily erased. A thought saturated with emotion is carved in stone. That is why emotionally charged experiences become unforgettable memories. And it is also why, if you learn to let emotions support right thought, the process of spiritual creation is accelerated beyond measure. Emotion is not the enemy. It only needs to be rightly placed. When emotion aligns with truth, it gives vitality to the spiritual design. When emotion clings to illusion, it faithfully builds illusion into reality. This is the perfect fairness of the law. It does not judge right or wrong by morality. It only works with the pattern you impress upon the mind. You are the architect. The law is the loyal builder. Whatever blueprint is given, that structure will rise. For this reason, vague wishes will never suffice. A single plea in weakness cannot overturn a blueprint drawn through years of repeated contrary thought. To change a reality, you need a vision with structure, held firm in clarity, nurtured with pure emotion, repeated until it becomes the natural foundation of the mind. Then the law has no choice but to manifest that vision into the concrete experience of your life. This is the power of voice within, not merely a voice you hear, but the inner sanctuary you return to. It is the voice inside that is not a passing sound, but a place where you reshape the spiritual design. Each time you return to that voice, you are redrawing the blueprint. You are saying to the law, this is what I intend to build. And the law, unfailingly loyal, begins construction from the new design. When you grasp this, You stop seeking change through surface efforts. You no longer wait for random luck or sudden jolts from the outside. Instead, you return inward, steadily repeating the right image, nurturing it with pure emotion until it becomes the living blueprint of your mind. And when the design is stable, the outer form has no choice but to mirror it exactly. This is both the secret and the responsibility. For if you have once repeated mistaken thoughts and watched them solidify into your life, now you can deliberately repeat right thoughts and watch life transform. No limit can hold you back, except your own lack of persistence. The law is neutral, fair, always waiting to serve, and it will always build according to the blueprint you provide. Whether that design is born of fear or born of truth, the lens of consciousness and order, the human mind, is like a lens. It does not generate light of its own, but it has the power to gather and direct light into specific form. That light is the presence of the divine mind, ever available, ever shining. The problem never lies in the source of light, but in the condition of the lens. If the lens is distorted by fear, by resentment, by shame, then the light passing through will scatter, bend, and lose its strength. But if the lens is clean, steady, and unshaken by impact, the light will pass through in concentrated power. It becomes healing, strength, order, and creation. A cracked lens cannot produce a clear image. In the same way, a mind holding inner contradictions cannot transmit the full power of spirit. Fear fragments, thought into pieces, resentment clouds vision, doubt shatters perception. The result is an outer life that mirrors distortion, confused, unstable, disconnected. Many mistake this for an unjust fate, but it is only the effect of an inward lens that has been warped. When the lens is purified, the light needs no effort. It moves straight, focused, becoming a mighty being. So it is with the mind. Once fear is released, resentment dissolved, and the dust of doubt cleared away, the divine light naturally becomes power through you. You do not need to create new strength. You need only clear the path for the strength that already is. From that purity, order arises, everything in life begins to fall into place. Not by frantic striving, but by the quiet adjustment within. Picture a room lined with mirrors. If the mirrors are clean, light enters and reflects in harmony, filling the space with brilliance. If the mirrors are dulled, the light is scattered and the room sinks into shadow. Your mind is those mirrors. The clarity of thought determines the brightness of reflection in your life. Order is not manufactured from without, but reflected from the inner lens, made accurate. Fear is the greatest crack in the lens. It not only distorts light, but multiplies shadows. When fear governs, even the smallest event is magnified into danger. You gaze upon the future through broken glass, and every road appears jagged. Resentment works the same. It coats the mind in dust, causing you to see others through the color of injury. Thus, the images reflected into your life lose truth and become deformed illusions. But when the mind is purified, you see things as they are, no addition, no distortion. The light passes through fully, and that very light carries healing. It gathers what is scattered, joins what is broken, restores the order you thought was lost in that light. You no longer strain to solve every problem one by one, for the light itself gives a new vision, and with corrected vision, the old problems dissolve of themselves. Life does not require you to hold every answer. It only requires you to clear the lens. When light is gathered into a single beam, it can cut through steel, ignite fire, or heal a wound. When your mind is kept in clarity, so it is with spiritual power. It cuts through barriers, releases trapped energy, and restores all things to their rightful order. Here is a truth few dare to face. The world you see is not the world as it is, but the world refracted through the lens of your mind. If your mind is in disorder, the world appears chaotic. If your mind is stable, the world reflects stability. This is not mysticism, but law in operation. Just as light through a lens, the image created depends wholly on the state of that lens. Therefore, your highest task is not to wrestle with the outer world, but to make the inner lens clean and steadfast. Do not waste energy disputing with shadows outside. Adjust the lens. When light is focused, darkness has no ground to stand. When the mind returns to clarity, order emerges naturally, like still water reflecting a clear sky. The Christ mind is the state of a pure lens. It is not warped by fear, not dimmed by resentment. It transmits the divine light whole, and that light becomes creative power. When you live from the Christ mind, the light through you no longer scatters, but focuses, strong and healing, and that is order, not order. You construct by effort of will, but the natural order of the universe revealed through you. If you wish to see life change, do not begin by adjusting the reflected image. Begin by cleaning the mirror. When the mirror is clear, the image will be clear. When the mind is adjusted, the light becomes power. And in that power, you will see that healing is not forced labor, but the natural effect of light passing accurately through the lens of consciousness. Emotion is weather. Thought is architecture. Emotions are like the weather, shifting swiftly, often unexpected, sometimes fierce, sometimes gentle. A breeze can swell into a storm. A warm day can suddenly turn to rain. Yet no one builds a lasting house on weather. A house stands upon blueprint and structure, not upon the whims of shifting skies. So it is with the mind. Emotion is only atmosphere, passing and temporary, but thought is the architecture that shapes life. Many mistake emotion for compass. They let mood decide words, actions, even their sense of worth. But to live so is like letting a gust of wind steer a great ship. A ship requires compass and chart. It cannot drift at the mercy of sudden breezes. Right thought is that compass, that enduring architecture which keeps life from being swept by every wave of feeling. When you allow emotion to lead, you live in endless upheaval. A word of praise lifts you high. A word of criticism breaks you down. The smallest event stirs a storm in your soul. But when you let right thought direct, emotion becomes natural result. Soft and balanced, positive emotion born of clear thought is not fleeting excitement, but deep peace. And that peace is not dictated by today's inner weather. It arises from the strong framework of spirit within. Emmet Fox reminded us that the Christ mind is not led by emotion. Rather, it orders emotion. Right thought gives birth to right feeling. Right feeling flowers into right action, and right action reshapes the world you live in. This process always follows sequence. Thought first, emotion after. Reverse the order, and you spiral, for emotion is never steady enough to serve as foundation. Emotion is signal, not command. It is like the morning sky hinting at rain or sun. Yet you still go about your work because your house is well built. When emotion rises, let it signal what you are thinking. If heavy, it shows thought gone astray. if light and clear, it shows thought in harmony with truth, but in either case, emotion is an indicator, not the final measure. The final measure is always the architecture of thought. One who lives by emotion builds upon sand. They may feel strong for a moment, but when the tide comes, the house falls. One who lives by right thought builds upon rock. Emotion may shift like the sea, yet the foundation stands. This firmness is not coldness, but the strength of balance. Even in inner storm, that steadiness draws emotion back into peace, because it is held within a structure already set. In order to see the difference when thought is set aright, an angry person imagines they act from feeling, but the root lies in distorted thought. The false idea lit the flame of anger, and anger shaped false action. Correct the idea, and anger finds no soil. The anxious are the same. They think fear is born of circumstance, but truly it springs from thought, not yet illumined. Change the thought. Fear dissolves, peace appears. Thus, emotion must be put in its proper place as effect, not cause. Use thought to lay the architecture of spirit, and let emotion rise as fruit. When you sow clear thought, the harvest is peace, joy, patience, gratitude. When you sow confused thought, the harvest is fear, anger, unrest. This is not accident, but law. So too the world outside is rebuilt in this order. An action born of right thought carries power to reshape circumstance. Enter a room with a clear mind, and the atmosphere shifts differently than when you enter with anxiety. Others may not explain it, but they feel it. The world cannot help but respond to the inner architecture you bring. The key is sequence. Do not begin with emotion, begin with thought. Do not let temporary weather dictate the foundation. Let solid architecture create the atmosphere. When the structure is set right, the weather of feeling will adjust, and when emotion is ordered, your actions follow with precision, and the world reflects the truth within. This is the sure path, not by strain, but by nature. Right thought, right feeling, right action, right result. Such is the spiritual causation. Nothing can overturn. And when you live in this chain, you discover peace is no longer a gift from outside, but the inevitable outcome of an inner architecture built strong. The battle with the ego on the threshold of liberation, inner resistance, is not a sign of failure, but proof that you are standing at the threshold of freedom. Each time you move closer to truth, the ego raises its wall of defiance. It does not wish to vanish, for its existence is woven out of fear, out of old stories, out of habits of defense. Yet know this, you do not have to fight the ego. You need only cease to feed it, cease to seek its counsel, and it will lose its strength. The ego lives on the energy you unknowingly supply. Each time you replay a memory of pain, it grows. Each time you heed the whisper of doubt, it gathers power. Each time you let fear lead, it is fortified. Yet the ego cannot survive without nourishment. It is not a true being. It is only a bundle of thoughts you have agreed to keep. Withdraw that agreement, and it dissolves. Thus, the battle with the ego is not a clash, but a purposeful release. You do not need to destroy it. You only need to refuse to feed it. When fear rises, instead of asking it whether you should go forward, you turn and listen to truth. When doubt whispers, instead of making it advisor, you let it fade like background noise, unworthy of attention. You do not argue with the ego, you stop conversing with it. And when you no longer seek the opinion of fear, you begin to hear the voice of freedom. Resistance is often strongest just before release. As a fire blazes brightest before it dies, the ego fights hardest when it senses you are leaving its control. You may feel this as inner tension, unease, or the urge to return to old paths. Do not mistake this for error. That resistance is the very proof that you are at the edge of a vast new freedom. If you turn back, the ego retains its throne. But if you remain steady, standing firm without feeding it, you will see it weaken, not because you defeated it in battle, but because you stopped supplying it. The power of the ego lies in your consent. When consent ends, its power vanishes. The threshold of liberation requires no struggle, only steadiness. It is like a long locked door. It does not open by force, but by the one key, non-cooperation. When you cease to cooperate with lies, with fear, with the replay of old stories, the door opens of itself. Beyond it lies deep relief, the space of peace that has always been there, only hidden. Many worry that without ego, they will be empty, fragile. The truth is the opposite. The ego is what made you weak, for it fed on constant defense. It required your exhaustion to survive. When you release it, you do not fall into emptiness. You return to your true strength, clarity, peace, and power were always present, waiting for you to remove the imposter from the throne. Observe the ego as you would a noisy disturber. The louder it shouts, the clearer its fear of vanishing. And the moment you cease to react, cease to argue, it begins to dissolve. You do not need to prove yourself stronger. You only need to stop playing its game. This battle is not won by victory, but by realizing no battle is needed. Once you understand this, inner resistance no longer frightens you. It is only a signal, the last breath of an old habit losing ground. You stop fearing resistance and instead smile, knowing it means you are on the right path. Each time the ego stirs, you are closer to freedom. Each time you refuse to feed it, you step further from its invisible prison. The threshold of liberation is not far away. It is present in the instant you stop asking fear for guidance. It appears in the moment you decide not to prove yourself with resentment. It shows itself when you dare to stand silent before the ego's noise without compromise. And when you cross it, you will see that freedom was never absent. You had only agreed to live under the rule of an imposter. From here, the spiritual journey grows lighter, for you have learnt one of the greatest secrets. Liberation does not come from winning the war, but from no longer fighting it. The ego does not need to be slain, it only needs to be starved. And when you cease to feed it with attention, it melts away like mist before the rising sun. Sacred silence is the ground of revelation. Silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of authority. It is the state where all the noise of the mind loses its grip, where meaningless cycles of thought fall away, leaving only a clear expanse in which the patterns of thought are revealed. Sacred silence is the soil of revelation, for only in stillness can Christ speak through spiritual logic, through radiant order, through truth that needs no disguise. The noise of the ego often pretends to be strength, but it is only a cover that keeps you from contact with reality. It floods you with endless questions, with doubts, with assumptions. It turns every experience into a stream of commentary so that you hear nothing beyond its chatter. But when you dare to step into silence without chasing, without explaining, without adding words, the noise begins to dissolve. And then another voice appears, a voice not loud, not showy, but steady, direct, certain. This is the power of voice within, not just a voice you hear, but a space you return to. It is not a passing sound, but a dwelling place. In that place, Christ does not come as surging emotion, but as sharp spiritual logic. He speaks with the plainness of truth, with an order that nothing can overthrow. This is not persuasion by feeling, but clarity, so complete that doubt has no ground to stand. When you live in silence, you begin to see clearly the thought patterns once hidden by noise, old habits of thinking, repeated prejudices, fragments of memory that no longer serve. These are laid bare. In noise, they were invisible. In silence, they stand out like words written on a white page, and once revealed, they lose their power. Light does not need to wrestle with darkness. It only needs to appear. Christ speaks in that silence, not with ornament, but with order. He does not embellish, does not debate, does not argue. He simply places all things in their rightful place. Wrong thoughts are exposed as wrong. Beyond defense, right thoughts shine as right. Beyond need of proof, this simplicity carries authority, for truth does not need to shout to be recognized. It only needs to be seen. Many fear silence, believing it is emptiness. But sacred silence is not empty. It is full of presence. It is where you cease retelling old stories to yourself, cease building layers of commentary, and leave room for the true voice to speak. In this silence, you learn to distinguish what belongs to truth and what is mere noise. That distinction is the foundation of freedom. Silence is also the ground where spiritual discipline is forged. For when there is no place left for noise, you are forced to face yourself. You cannot hide behind activity, nor escape into feeling. All that remains is truth, and in that truth, without haste, without struggle, all things become transparent. From that transparency, order emerges. When you live from sacred silence, your actions no longer arise from emotional impulse, but from thought refined in clarity. You do not react in panic. You act in certainty. You are not swept into endless arguments. You speak when needed, and your words carry weight. For once thought has been illumined in silence, every word and every deed reflects the authority of order. This is why every great spiritual tradition has emphasized silence, not the silence outside, but the silence within, where the ego no longer dictates the story. In that state, Christ is no longer a concept, but a voice alive in your life. He guides not with fleeting emotion, but with steady logic. He does not soothe with illusion, but heals with truth. Sacred silence is the ground of revelation. In that ground, you stop seeking miracles outside and begin to see miracles sprouting from within. No need for noise, no need for dramatic displays, only the return to this space. And when you return, you have stepped into the center where Christ has always been, where truth has always had a voice, where spiritual order forever triumphs over noise. Consecrated imagination. Imagination is not the mind's game, nor a fleeting place for idle dreams. It is the design chamber of the divine, where the first blueprints of life are drawn. Every structure in the outer world begins with a design within, and that design is the image you nurture in imagination. Its power does not lie merely in the ability to picture, but in the consecration discipline placed upon it. An undisciplined imagination is like a project without an architect. It sketches chaos, worries, tragedies, old wounds, failures, and because the spiritual law is neutral, it does not discriminate between worthy and unworthy images. It simply obeys and builds the image you hold longest, repeat most often, and charge with deepest feeling becomes the command for the law to shape into circumstance. Thus, an unconsecrated imagination becomes a factory that reproduces nightmares. But when imagination is disciplined by principle, it becomes a sacred instrument. The images you choose to hold are no longer reflections of fear, but expressions of truth. Instead of sketching the worst-case scenario, you begin to draw visions aligned with the Christ mind, clear, strong, exact. Then imagination ceases to be the origin of anxiety and becomes the birthplace of creative power. Imagination, in this sense, is the channel through which divine power works. It is like the architect's drafting table. Place a crooked design upon it, and the building will rise crooked. Place a balanced, ordered plan, and the structure will stand solid and beautiful. No one blames the builder when a structure collapses, for the builder only follows the plan. The spiritual law works the same. It builds upon the images entrusted to imagination. This explains why Emmet Fox called imagination one of the soul's highest faculties. It is not mere fancy, but the organ of form, the bridge between the invisible and the visible. Whatever you wish to appear in life must first be built in imagination, then held firm, repeated, infused with feeling, until the spiritual law has no choice but to clothe it in outer form. Yet imagination becomes sacred only when consecrated. To consecrate it is to place it under the discipline of principle, refusing to let it drift with memory or fear. An untrained mind will let imagination default to the familiar, usually the negative, deeply imprinted patterns. But when you consecrate imagination, you transform it into a holy space where only right images are allowed to remain. A consecrated imagination does not need noise or drama. It works in stillness, like a hidden stream, steadily shaping the new image. Each day, when you close your eyes and form a clear, bright, ordered vision, you are issuing instructions to the spiritual law, and the law will respond not with sudden explosion, but with steady certainty until the inner image becomes the outer life. You cannot pray for peace while imagining conflict. You cannot affirm abundance while secretly sketching lack. You cannot call for love while replaying betrayal. The law does not heed your words. It heeds the images you keep. This is why consecrating imagination is the turning point. From then on, you take ownership of life's blueprint. The wonder is that once imagination is consecrated, you no longer feel weary of forcing yourself. Instead, you sense joy and peace in shaping the right image. Like an architect who loves his work, you begin to delight in drawing the spiritual plan. That delight itself becomes energy that feeds the image, making it vivid, making it easier to sustain. Remember, imagination never ceases. The question is not whether you imagine, but what you imagine. If not held under principle, it will be seized by old memory and fear, but once consecrated, it becomes the divine design chamber where accurate directives are issued for the law to faithfully build into reality. And this is the greatest power you can ever hold in your hands. Spiritual integrity over performance. The spiritual law never responds to appearances or eloquent words. It is not impressed by outward form, nor deceived by performance. It reflects with exactness the pattern you are truly holding within. Thus, what matters is not your ability to speak beautiful affirmations or offer long prayers, but whether you are living in alignment with what you believe and think. If the inner life is full of contradiction, the law will reflect that contradiction outward, no matter how well it is concealed. spiritual performance is the mask people often wear to be accepted. You may appear calm before others, but if your mind is anxious in secret, it is anxiety that is planted. You may speak confidently of prosperity, but if you still hold the image of lack deep within, it is lack that will become your life's experience. The law of spirit is never swayed by the stage. It works only with the truth of the inner life. For this reason, a cleansing in silence is required, not an effort to erase every flaw, but the courage to face contradictions and wash them away. You cannot both believe in healing and nourish memories of sickness. You cannot pray for peace while harboring resentment. Spiritual integrity is where inner and outer meet, where no gap remains. When you live in integrity, word and thought are not divided. Action and belief are one, and it is this wholeness that allows the Christ mind to operate fully through you. Integrity does not mean perfection. You may still stumble, still feel weakness. The difference is that you no longer defend your contradictions with excuses or concealment. You dare to see the disorder within and choose no longer to identify with it. Each time you refuse to give contradiction a place in your identity, you are cleansing the mirror of the mind. And when the mirror is clear, the light passes through whole, reflecting into life with clarity. To live in spiritual integrity is to cease living in two worlds, to stop building images for approval, and to choose honesty with yourself. Life then requires little explanation, for truth carries persuasion greater than words. When thought is clean, your presence itself becomes testimony. When inside and outside are one, the law reflects with directness, and on that ground peace is unshakable. Do you recognize how many masks you wear to win acceptance? How many times you speak one thing but think another? How often you choose short-term comfort over long-term truth? These are the questions I place before you, for your honesty in answering will reveal where you stand on this journey. And if you are listening now, I thank you for your presence, for even the act of pausing to reflect on this is already a step toward integrity. The law has no concern for masks. It concerns itself only with the self who thinks within. If you want life to change, do not alter the surface, alter the root. When thought is free of contradiction, the world no longer reflects confusion. When belief is unified, the result is unified, and this is the strength of spiritual integrity, the strength of living true to yourself, inner discipline and the sovereignty of thought. No thought you hold ever passes by without consequence. Each one is a seed planted in the soil of the subconscious, a silent command given to the spiritual law to begin shaping reality. If the seed is sound, the harvest will be sound. If the seed is twisted, the result will be twisted. There is no neutral thought. Every thought is either building or destroying. This is why inner discipline is the irreplaceable foundation of the spiritual journey. This discipline is not harsh rigidity, but an act of love for truth. It does not arise from fear of being wrong, but from loyalty to what is right. The one who practices inner discipline does not live in strain, but in clarity. They know that each thought is a prayer being sent, a seed destined to sprout, so they treat every thought with care and reverence. This is not the discipline of oppression, but the discipline of freedom, for it releases you from slavery to old, chaotic patterns of mind. The sovereignty of thought is the highest responsibility of life. You cannot control the weather or the outer circumstances, but you can decide which thoughts are allowed to remain in your mind. That is the one door for which you hold the key. The thought you accept and nurture leaves its imprint. The thought you refuse disappears. Every outer experience is only the reflection of what you have permitted to live within. Yet inner discipline is not forged in rare dramatic moments. but in the 100 small choices of each day. When a thought of resentment arises, do you feed it or let it pass? When a memory of fear returns, do you give it lodging or replace it with a clearer vision? When doubt seeks to intrude, do you cooperate with it or return to the order of truth? These small, repeated choices are what create a new spiritual atmosphere. Atmosphere does not change overnight. It is the result of countless quiet decisions, like the air of a room gradually cleansed as windows are opened to let new breezes flow. Each clear thought is a breath of fresh air. Each right thought, a beam of light that drives away shadow. Patiently maintain inner discipline, and the chamber of the mind will become bright until no darkness finds a place to hide. Do not confuse discipline with force. Force creates tension and soon collapses. True discipline is not coercion, but quiet faithfulness to what is right. It is like a gardener patiently tending his field, pulling weeds when they first appear, watering seedlings daily, not rushing, not neglecting. The mind requires the same care. Left unattended, the weeds of fear and resentment will spread. But when guarded by love for truth, the clear seeds will flourish. The sovereignty of thought also means you stop blaming the outer world, no longer saying that anxiety comes from circumstance, or anger from another, or disappointment from events. You recognize that feelings are only responses to thoughts you have chosen to believe. Change the thought, and you change the feeling. Change the feeling, and action shifts. Change the action, and results shift. It all begins with a discipline of thought. A disciplined mind is not one that never sees a wrong thought, but one that instantly discerns and chooses. A mistaken thought may arise, but it is not given nourishment. It passes like a cloud drifting across the sky. Right thoughts, however, are kept repeated until they form the natural atmosphere. This is the power of discipline, to make truth a habit and to make error a passerby with no home. To live with inner discipline does not make you rigid, it makes you free. For when you are no longer swept away by every thought that appears, you become chooser, gatekeeper, sovereign. That is a true position of authority, and from that position, you build life not by accident, but by design, not by reaction, but by creation. Then you will discover that discipline is not a burden, but a grace. It grants you the power to bring every thought under the pattern of truth. And from there, the spiritual law reflects life with accuracy. Once the spiritual atmosphere has been changed, you no longer labor to maintain peace. Peace becomes natural. You no longer struggle to find strength. Strength becomes your character. And all of it begins with 100 small choices of each day, with inner discipline and the sovereignty of thought, keeping order in the storm of the world, amid the upheavals of the world. It is easy for the mind to be tossed like a small boat on rough seas. News floods in, voix clamour. Sudden events press upon you as if demanding an instant reaction. But the truth is, you're not called to chase every wave. You are called to stand on the rock where the order of spirit is stronger than the storm of circumstance, not to flee from life, but to bring order into life so that your very presence becomes an anchor of calm in the field around you. The world will always have waves. When one subsides, another rises. If your life is built upon their motion, you will live in exhaustion. But if your life is founded upon spiritual order, you are no longer dependent on the state of the sea. You can see the waves, feel their force, yet you are not dragged by them. You stand firm, and that firmness itself becomes a witness to others that there is another foundation, another order, unshakable. Spiritual order is not indifference, nor cold detachment. It is the capacity to answer chaos with structure instead of reaction. When the world urges you to panic, you choose silence. When others argue for victory, you choose words brief and steady. When uncertainty looms, you do not collapse in fear. You stand in clarity. This is power without display, for your very presence carries the atmosphere of order. This is the power of voice within, not merely a voice you hear, but the space you return to. It is the inner ground from which you respond to the world's uproar. From this place, you need not wrestle with every wave. You are already standing on the rock, and from that rock, every response carries the weight of truth. The storm of the world cannot be avoided, but you can choose your place within it. You can rush with the waves, letting emotions and thoughts sweep you away, or you can stand in order, turning each decision into a stone that holds the structure firm. In choosing order, you not only preserve yourself, but radiate stability into your surroundings. Others may not understand why you do not waver, but they will feel the strength of your presence. Remember, the Christ mind is never governed by chaos. It sees through the appearance, beholds the order beneath, and acts from that order. You are called to do the same. Do not ask how to still the waves. Ask how to stand upon the rock. Do not seek to silence the world. Seek to keep your mind structured. Even as the world shouts, your presence then becomes a living prayer. You need not speak much, need not prove anything. Your steadiness is the message. In a tense meeting, you remain calm, and the air begins to soften. In a family quarrel, your voice is measured, and peace begins to spread. In a world of turmoil, you walk with certainty, and those near you feel safe. This is the influence of spiritual order carried into daily life. Keeping order in the storm is not a one-time act, but a daily practice. Each day you are given the choice to stand on rock or be swept by waves. And each time you choose the rock, the foundation grows stronger. Gradually, the choice becomes natural, no longer effort, but reflex. Then, though the storm may rage, you are unmoved. You have become part of the foundation, not part of the wave. Order is not rigidity, but living stability. It allows you to be flexible without losing root, gentle without being weak. It is like a great tree. The wind may shake its branches, but roots sunk deep in earth keep it from falling. So, with your life, when rooted in spiritual order, no upheaval can tear you from your center. And this is our calling, not to escape the storm, but to stand within it and yet remain in peace. Not to vanish from the world, but to bear into it a witness that there is a higher order, a firme foundation, a light that cannot be quenched. When you live from that order, you not only free yourself, you become strength for others. You become the rock in the restless sea, the living sign that peace is not far away, but the natural result of returning to the true center within. The incarnation of Christ as a living function. Christ is not meant to remain a concept contemplated in prayer, nor a fleeting inspiration in a quiet moment. When truly received, Christ becomes a living function, the default pattern of thought, the invisible foundation shaping your tone, your pauses, your choices, your daily actions. This is no longer about striving to imitate some lofty model, but about the mind being so reordered that Christ operates naturally through you. When Christ becomes the living function, you no longer wonder how to speak rightly, for your voice naturally reflects clarity. You no longer calculate each step to protect an image, for even your pauses, your gaze, your breath radiate balance. What once required effortful control now becomes reflex, like an instrument tuned to perfection, producing harmony effortlessly at the touch. This embodiment makes power light clear, unpretentious. It needs no spectacle to affirm itself. Its presence is found in your silence, in the peace that flows from your listening, in the precision of your smallest choices. No one needs you to declare that Christ lives in you. Others feel it in the atmosphere you bring. It is a strength without words, a presence unhidden yet never displayed. When Christ becomes a living function, the gap between spirit and daily life dissolves. There is no longer separation between meditation and work, between sacred moment and ordinary hour. Every action becomes an extension of illumined thought. You enter labor with the same clarity as prayer. You speak with family with the same peace as when listening to truth. No more two worlds, only one. A world ordered by Christ in every detail. This presence does not come from hoarding knowledge, but from faithful practice of right thought until it shapes the mind's new structure. A pattern repeated long enough becomes the natural path. If once you thought in worry and reacted in anger, now you think in clarity and respond in peace. This new habit is not strain but freedom, for it releases you from the old reflexes that bound you. When Christ becomes your default mode of thought, you notice the difference in small details. Your voice softens under tension. Your eyes remain calm in uncertainty. Your hands are steady in decision. Others may not know why, but they sense something different in you. This is not social technique, but the mark of a mind reordered by Christ. To embody Christ also means you no longer depend on bursts of inspiration to act. Inspiration may come and go, but function endures. When Christ is your living function, you act not by inspiration, but by inner order. You do not wait for feeling to do what is right. You have become one who lives from what is right. And this makes you steady, for though the world may change, the function within remains constant. The power of Christ in you spreads not by loud voice, but by accurate one. A short word from truth carries more weight than 100 ornamented phrases. A small act in clarity holds more influence than the grandest gestures. When Christ is function, you learn the art of less but deeper, quiet yet lasting, hidden yet radiant. Most of all, you no longer pretend. Once you may have struggled to hold peace, but now peace is reflex. Once you had to remind yourself not to react, but now you naturally choose order. This is not suppression, but transformation, where the old nature fades and a new nature takes form. And this new nature is Christ operating in you as a living function. When this occurs, you walk in an ease unknown before. Not ease, because life holds no challenge, but ease, because you no longer battle yourself in every choice. You no longer strain to prove or to defend. Christ has become your default mind, and from that foundation, power flows through you like clear water, silent, unstoppable. This is the true incarnation, not a symbol to worship from afar, but a living reality moving through you, saturating your voice, your pauses, your decisions. Christ is not a notion recalled in time of need, but the function from which you live moment by moment, and that life itself becomes the strongest message that true power needs no display, only to be lived naturally, gently, and with boundless reach. Return to order and rest. The spiritual path is not a project of patching yourself together to become better, but a journey of removing the layers of illusion that have covered the truth. You do not need to fix yourself as though you were broken, for what is real in you has never been broken. What must fall away are the shells of false conclusions distorted memories, and habits of wrong thinking. When these layers dissolve, you return to the primal pattern, where spirit has always been whole and order has always been present. To return to order is not to climb to some new rung, but to come back to the foundation. It is the pattern of the Christ mind, the precise arrangement of the divine intelligence impressed upon you from the beginning. All chaos in life arises only when you temporarily forget this pattern and agree with false images. But the moment you choose to think rightly, to set your mind in order, the spiritual law carries out the rest. Many strive to change by outer action, but forget that the law does not respond to appearances or effort. It responds to the inner pattern of thought. When thought is wrong, action becomes a futile cycle. When thought is right, action is simple. Kyatet. Effective power does not come from forcing change in external details, but from returning to your true place in inner order. To rest in this pattern is not passivity, but the release of the burden of self-repair. You stop struggling to prove yourself good enough, worthy enough. You stop seeking evidence from the world to confirm your value. When you think rightly, when you let the Christ mind shape your thought, the law works faithfully, building life upon that order, and then rest becomes the atmosphere you breathe daily. This rest does not erase challenges, but transforms the way you move through them. You no longer meet problems with panic, but with clarity. You no longer waste energy resisting, but use energy to remain true to your real identity. And once identity is secure, the world loses its power to pull you from order. Each decision is made in wisdom. Each action reflects order. Each outcome bears the imprint of rest. What matters is that this clarity is no fleeting inspiration, but becomes your new identity. This identity is not built by personal strain, but by steady loyalty to right thought. You think rightly, you maintain clarity, and over time, it becomes reflex, no longer something you must remind yourself of, but something you have become. This is the true destination of the journey, not to acquire something more, but to return to yourself. To return to order and rest also means you no longer need to seek certainty from things outside. Though circumstances shift, the inner foundation remains. Though people change, you remain yourself. Though the world wavers, you stand in unchanging order. This is not rigidity, but living stability, free to move flexibly, yet never losing center. When you live from this order, others may wonder if storms have ceased in your life. No, the storms remain, but the way you stand in them has changed. You are no longer swept away, but become the still point at the center of the world, and from that stillness, rest radiates into the environment around you. This is not proof of perfection, but witness to the truth that when a person returns to the original pattern, Christ naturally incarnates and the spiritual law naturally works. Order and rest are not rewards for a chosen few, but the inheritance of all who dare to strip away illusion. You do not need to add anything. You only need to subtract what is false. And when the false falls, the light of the primal pattern shines, guiding you effortlessly. Then life is no longer the burden of having to do, but the joy of simply being, no longer straining to become, but the freedom of living as your true nature. This is the end of the journey. A life built on clarity, sustained in rest, reflecting the order that has always been. No more masks, no more fleeing, no more contradiction, only honesty with your true identity, unity of right thought, and peace unshakable, And then you know you have come home not by becoming something new, but by returning to what you have always been. When you have walked through all 16 steps, you will discover an unchanging truth. You are not a misplaced fragment. You are the embodiment of divine order. You do not need to strain to repair yourself, only to release the layers of illusion and think rightly. The law will fulfill the rest. From this point on, clarity is no longer something you seek, but the very identity you live. And as you step into the world with that identity, you not only find peace for yourself, you also carry it into the world. This is the incarnation of Christ, not as a distant idea, but as your breath, your step, your presence in every day.